This is a quick video about quotations. By now, you probably know what a quotation is. It's when you use somebody else's words and you indicate a quotation by putting it in quotation marks. But where people go wrong sometimes is trying to integrate quotations into their own writing. So that's what we're going to talk about. Everything's an Argument talks about quotations in depth on pages 471 to 475. So if you have particular questions that I don't cover, I recommend that you look there. The main thing you want to indicate is who is speaking. So a reader is going to assume that you're the one speaking. And when a different voice comes along, you need to show that there's a shift. A signal phrase signals that you're shifting from your words to someone else's. So here are a couple examples. According to noted primatologist Jane Goodall, consultant William Bridges argues. Notice that these both give the first and last name of the author and who that person is. That's what you want to do the first time you introduce someone. Then if you refer to that person later on, you can just use the last name. It's important to indicate who's speaking because otherwise it seems like there's just a voice coming out of the heavens, a voice appearing out of nowhere, much like what happens to Will Ferrell in Stranger Than Fiction.
And he began it the same way he always did.
Hello?
He began it the same way he always did. When others' minds would...
Hello? Someone there?
When others' minds would fantasize about their upcoming day or even try to grip onto the final moments of their dreams, Harold just counted brush strokes.
All right, who just said Harold just counted brush strokes? But how do you know I'm counting brush strokes? Hello?
So in that movie, there is an author who's writing, and everything she writes actually happens in Will Ferrell's life. And one day he suddenly begins hearing her voice. But you don't want to do that in your papers. You don't want a voice just appearing out of nowhere. You want to always signal that that shift is happening and identify whose the voice is. There are three main ways to integrate quotations into your work. The first is with a signal phrase, which you set off with commas. For example, Goblin researcher Mona Prim argues, comma, quote, essentially goblins are just like elves, except dumber and uglier. Notice that the period goes inside the quotation marks. You can put that signal phrase at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the quotation. Wherever you put it, you're going to set it off with commas. So here in the middle, there's a comma before the quotation mark. Oops, sorry about that. And after the signal phrase, here there's a comma before the quotation and a period afterwards. You can also blend quotations into your own sentence. So rather than quoting an entire sentence from the original source, just quote a phrase. Goblin researcher Mona Prim compares goblins to elves, admitting that goblins are, quote, dumber and uglier. And then you can also use a complete sentence to introduce the quotation. When you do that, follow it with a colon. Prim makes a bold prediction for the future of human-goblin relations, colon. If the species were better understood, goblins could replace dogs as humans' best friend. If I had put a period here, then this quotation would be floating off by itself in space. It would be one of those talking toothbrushes. So it's important to use a colon after a complete sentence or use one of these other two models. If you get tired of saying according to or she says, here is a good list of verbs to use. They're in your book, but I'll also put this slideshow on Talon. Now, this is about citation, MLA style citation. MLA requires that you put the author's last name and a page number if there is one. So since I gave the author's last name in those previous examples, if it were an internet source, I would be done. However, if it's a print source that has page numbers, I would need to add the page number in parentheses at the end. Notice that it goes quotation, no comma or period here, and then the parentheses with the page number, no period or anything like that, and the period goes after the parentheses. If you don't put the author's name in the sentence, what if I just said a prominent goblin researcher in my signal phrase? In that case, I would need to put the author here at the end. And this is a helpful way to do it also if the article by Prim is quoting some other prominent goblin researcher, Jones, for example. If I say Jones here, I'm going to need to say Prim here because it's the author of the source, the author of the article that needs to go there. You want to avoid long quotations, but if for some reason you need a quotation 5 or more lines long, then you need to use that third method of integration, an entire sentence to introduce the quotation followed by a colon. And instead of using quotation marks, you're going to indent the entire quote from the left. Then follow up with your own words back at the left margin. Hopefully that was a little bit of review for you. If you have any questions, feel free to get in contact or look it up in your book or ask the Writing Center. There are lots of ways to get help.